Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for another great watch and discuss that we have this evening for you. We have a great panel of ladies that are going to have a moment to introduce themselves here shortly, and we'll get right into it. Before we do so, I just want to say thank you again to Terry Watson for putting this together this evening for this great opportunity for us to have dialogue and conversate with each other around a very important topic. My name is Iris Richardson. I am the Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with University Police and Public Safety. It's a brand new position that was created in 2019. And I look forward to this conversation this evening. I just want to put a disclaimer out there for anyone who is not necessarily in law enforcement in the sense of sworn. This is open to dialogue and conversation for those that are non-sworn, like myself as well. Without further ado, I will start with our first panelist. Deirdre Fishel is the Director for Women in Blue. Our next panelist is Denisha Martin. She is the Director for Impact. And our other two panelists this evening is Shawnette Hall. She is the VP for Ethical Society of Police. And last but not least, we have Mirelda Sanchez, who is a police officer with the Pentwater Police Department. Thank you all, and join me in welcoming the panel this evening.
What's your password?
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to put just another disclaimer out there. As we all know, we're working from home, so we might have kids or family members in the background. We embrace them this evening, and we will go ahead and get started. So Deirdre, I will start with you with the first question, and if you want to introduce yourself with anything more about your bio, feel free to do so.
Sure. I'm Deirdre Fishel, and I am the director of the BFA in film and video. That's an important part of what I do, is nurture young filmmakers. And I make all of my films are about trying to create social change. Yeah.
All right. So
do you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, I have the first question is, so what do you want people to take away from this film?
Yeah, I mean, when I just to back up 1 second, I started the film because I was so upset about police brutality, and in particular, the killing of Eric Garner, which happened near where I was filming my last film. And I started reading about women and what they bring, and a different approach to public safety. And that made me really want to explore what could women bring, It seemed like that was not something in people's consciousness. After making the film and spending 3 years with the Minneapolis Police Department and spending time both with extraordinary officers, but also with a police department that, despite trying to reform, was really struggling with police brutality, excessive use of force, what I hope people will take away is that as we look to reimagine public safety, that we really think about what women, and particularly Black women and women of color, can bring, and that their numbers are still so low at 12%. But I also hope that the film brought up that I think we need systemic change. And I hope that people will take away both that we need that systemic change, and also how complex change can really be, but that it's an imperative because lives are at stake.
Yeah, we'll definitely say some of those things were definitely brought out in the film, and we'll definitely dig into those a little more. Again, I apologize. I'm going to jump back to introductions, and then we'll do questions. So next up, I have Ganesha. I apologize.
I think
you're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry about that. A year into it, we should be well practiced, 12,000 Zooms a day. But anyway, it is such a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I am Denisha Martin. I am a lawyer by education and training. Fell into local government about 12 years ago. I started out in Baltimore City. I was the assistant deputy mayor of public safety and emergency management under Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake. At that time, she also brought in a police chief from California whose focus was supposed to be on police reform and repairing what was not broken, but eviscerated relationships between police and Black and brown communities in Baltimore City. We began to work on that reform proactively, but then we started seeing in the media shootings of unarmed Black men around the country. And as a result, our local legislator decided to try to make things better. And I'm sure some of you know sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. So I went up to our legislator to try to make sure those things were actually done well. I told the commissioner what I saw from activists and community is that they hated the police, and that relationship really needed work. So we created the Bureau of Community Engagement. And then the very next day, Freddie Gray died. And so we were in the midst of the uprising where I tried to continue to work on those relationships. Then the Department of Justice came in to investigate us. I took on a new role, the chief of the Department of Justice, Compliance, Accountability, and External Affairs, in which it was my job to negotiate the last consent decree under President Obama and start implementing those reforms in the police department. I left after doing that. And started doing consent decree oversight work across the country, started in Cleveland with the murder of Tamir Rice. Continued to do that work, went back to the mayor's office for a short amount of time to be the director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, and since has left and continue to do work with police and communities across the country. I'm really happy to, I was about to jump to that question, but I know you're going to come back to it. So really, really happy to be here with you all tonight to have this very, very important conversation.
Thank you again. Thank you. And then next up, we have Shawnette Hall.
Good evening. As I was sitting here thinking, I was like, I hope she's not about to call on me after the introduction. I'm about to say, yeah, this is my name and this is what I do. It's so wonderful to be on a panel with other women, and it never ceased to amaze me how we have no limitations, right? But my name is Shawnette Hall, and I am a police officer in the lovely Midwest area, more specifically in the St. Louis area. More importantly, what I like to think of is I'm a second vice president of an organization called the Ethical Society of Police. And the Ethical Society of Police is an organization founded by mostly African-American police officers in 1972, who decided to get together in the St. Louis area and decided that they were going to fight against race-based discrimination in the police departments as well as within communities. And talk about a heavy time in 1972 of trying to almost form this association with Black officers, right? Well, it would be an interesting thing for most people to know that the fight still continues from 1972 to now here to 2021. So there's enough work for us to do, and I take pride in the work we do. We're a champion for fairness and equality and equity when it is needed as well too. So once again, thank you for having me, and I'm so happy to be here with these other ladies.
Thank you. Thank you. And last but not least, Mirelda.
Hello. My name is Mirelda Sanchez Tokarczyk. I am honored for this opportunity. I'm so thankful to be part of this. I want to thank everybody for this opportunity, whoever made this possible, everybody that made this possible. This is something that's really important. And like Shanette had talked about, is that it continues, this type of work continues. And in every different departments. And, I wish they could make a documentary of the police, my former police department, because it shows that it's happening, it does happen, and it continues. But I am working as a patrol officer at Pentwater Police Department. Very happy there, great leadership. And I'm involved in a lot of different things that are dear to my heart. Women information, Disability Justice League, Progressive Democratic Women's Caucus, everything that I think that can make a difference, advocate. I really believe in advocating. We have a lot of discrimination in just all over, in community, everything. And I was an elected official for the city of Roosevelt Park, and just seeing the dynamics of politics and how it affects everything in your life is really eye-opening, and it helps seeing what we can and can't do, how hard and difficult it is, and how much we need each other. One person can't do it. So I see a problem and I want to fix it like most women. And I ran for Muskegon County Sheriff because I knew I could do better. Unfortunately, I didn't make it, but just being able to work with other women and being able to take little steps to make it better for our kids, for our nieces and nephews, for my brothers and family is very important. So, I so appreciate this, and I'm glad that we're talking about this and really getting deep into the conversations.
Thank you again, ladies. As you've heard, my viewers, we have brought far and wide reaches in different ways and how we're trying to impact and support and uplift each other as women in this field, in this profession, whether we are, again, as I shared, sworn or non-sworn, but we are in it for the long haul and to put this work in. And so just one thing I want to hit on about the film before we jump into your individual questions is that was brought up is, yes, there's a small number of not even just women, but women of color in this field, in this profession. And I believe the statistics had showed in one area, there was only 6 women of color. And then the one officer was able to get a ranking a little bit higher in the film. And then another female was able to then get ranked or promoted much later after 2 other men who were under her. Again, I'm still learning the rankings, but who were under her were then immediately promoted above her. Can you just talk a little bit more about that, Deirdre, and what again, that takeaway piece of what you wanted the viewers to take away from that piece?
Yeah. I mean, the crazy thing when you make a documentary is that I'm not sure where to look. So is that good? Yeah. Okay, great. So, is that you don't know what's going to happen. And I came into the department with a very strong woman chief who was trying to reform the department and saw women as one critical part of the bigger puzzle. But she was, ousted 3 months after I got there. So it was a very different film than I thought I was going to make. And to be frank, there were multiple officer-involved shootings, which was heartbreaking to watch. I have to say that George Floyd, for many people, was not a big shock. What the big thing was that it was filmed by a brave 17-year-old girl, and the world saw it. But that department had been dealing with that for a long time. But in terms of internally, the women lost a huge amount of power. And I think for someone like, Inspector Johnson, after having been there for so long and to watch 2 men be brought up and over her, it's such a rank system. It seemed, I think it just felt to her like she wasn't going to be able to have any impact. And that was so depressing. And she was offered a job as head of corrections and sort of felt like, okay, that's where I can have some impact and positive. But then it was, all the women were, I have to be honest, they were not treated well. They lost, and it was heartbreaking because here were people with visionary ideas and who were really trying to create change and were really coming at policing with heart and compassion at a time when that's just what we need. That's just what communities are calling for. But it is, I think that there are women all over the country. And I think as we look to, to bring women into policing, it's not going to just be recruiting, which are still all those hiring practices favor men and are about upper body strength and don't ask questions about sort of your empathy, your ability to deal with diverse communities, all the things that we actually really need. But also there's going to have to be a way to protect women so that these kinds of things can't happen. Chiefs have a lot of power, and in an all-male institution, there's still a lot of kind of, placating. We're saying like, look, this will make the larger rank and file happy at the expense of the minority of women. And the fact that there were only 6 Black women in a city that had such a horrible relationship with communities of color was a travesty. But it's not, what are you going to say? We were talking, Ganesha and I were on another panel, and, this one very high-ranking, Black woman officer said, well, what am I going to say? You're going to be passed over. You're going to be treated badly. Like, it's hard to get people in to the profession right now. And I think it's partly how people are treated and partly what's allowed to happen and the lack of accountability.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Again, I'll just reiterate again, part of my position is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the inclusion and the equity piece typically gets missed out on when we're thinking about this. The opportunities that I'm saying young ladies, they're obviously older than me, but these women had experience and skills, from what you were able to capture, they were just looked over, or voices and feedback was just looked over. So I thank you again for capturing that for us so that we can process. Because again, something that I'm thinking about is, yes, I can recruit women, but then how do I make sure that they feel included? How do we do that? How do we make sure that they're getting the equitable resources and the support and tools that they need to be successful to move up in the rankings as well? And so I thank you again for shining some light on that as well. I will jump into the next question. And again, panelists, if you want to give feedback to anybody else's questions, feel free to do so. But the next question is for Ganesh. Can you tell us about the impact campaign and why it's important?
Yeah, I mean, when Deirdre was talking, it was just hitting me on all these different levels. I'm sure it's the same for all the other ladies on the panel. So I'm gonna try to stay focused, but there was so much stuff with that. So as I mentioned, I was a chief, which in Baltimore City, the 8th largest police department in the United States, and everybody knows the issues that Baltimore struggles with. I was a third senior person, direct report to the commissioner. I came from City Hall, so you all already know what that's for real, an outsider. I was a woman, so that was something extra. I was a Black woman, and then I happened to be a woman who doesn't hold her tongue. And I can tell you that, it was very interesting. One of our first command meetings, the commissioner, I guess, was picking up on the vibe, and he looked around to the folks in the room, and he says, "Oh, it's because she doesn't trust us. That's why she's speaking this way." And so I went to the police department with a complete distrust of the police because of not my own experiences, but because of the experiences of my brother. I had been on the phone listening to things that were happening to him. So I went in a bit jaded, but two things happened that were very important. One, I have a person who I love very much who suffers from he's bipolar. And he happened to be arrested in one city by two different jurisdictions. One jurisdiction treated him like a human being, took him to the hospital, tried to make sure that he was okay. And then the other one did some things to him that were excessive force and abusive. And so really early on as a chief of staff, I actually saw the difference between what I would call a good police officer, one that is trained well, has the equipment and the training and all the things to do things well, and one who should never have a badge, who should never have a gun and should be under the jail. And so that was the first thing. The second thing was there was an officer involved shooting, and to go to a hospital and see a mother and children standing around a police officer who was hanging on for dear life, it puts a different perspective, because the worst I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come on a panel, I'm gonna get some thumbs down, I'm gonna, have a bad PowerPoint, but they were putting their lives on the line. And so I had to have some respect for that. So that kind of shifted my thinking into how can I be a bridge? How can I make sure that the police are equipped to have what they need to get to help the communities that they need? So that was the first piece. The second piece, to get directly to your question, why this impact campaign is important to me. When I was at the police department as the chief, I started looking around and I was like, where are all the women in the command ranks? And I also started noticing that I was seeing a lot of women carrying around Starbucks, going to the chief's office or the assistant chief's office. And I was like, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But if you're doing this because there is not the opportunity for you to promote the good old boy system, the click system, all that, I have a problem with that. And so I created the Women in Law Enforcement Support Group, in which, and this may surprise people in your audience, but not the law enforcement, on the things like they couldn't wear their hair in braids. They couldn't paint their fingernails. They couldn't wear earrings, you know, these very antiquated type of things. So I got them together. Let's put together a petition. And I went to the commissioner behind the scenes and I said, you're going to get a petition and you're going to sign it. But, you know, and we started having women where they could self-select themselves for promotion. Had a single mother come. She said 20 years she had never been able to have the opportunity. She cried in the command meeting. In the interview for the opportunity. And she ended up becoming one of the highest ranking women in Baltimore Police Department. Just last week, one of the majors that we helped make back then just became the first African-American female deputy commissioner, Cherie Briscoe, in Baltimore City. And so this impact campaign is important to me because it takes the people on the inside to see it, to make a difference. But guess who else I was talking to? I was talking to the mayor. I was talking to the city council. I was talking to the governor. I was talking to the community groups. It takes everybody to make sure that these issues are seen. And I was lucky that I had a commissioner that supported me 100%. But I can tell you right now, I've talked to 3 Black female chiefs. And they are getting the business right now. You'll understand this diversity, equity, inclusion. They were given the position with no power, with no support, and constantly being second guessed, and where their predecessors did things. And so it's multifaceted, and the support and the thoughtfulness sometimes can come from inside. But other times you might need the pressure, the legislation, the funding, different things from outside. So the impact campaign for this film is meant to show this issue to the multitudes and to say, in whatever lane you have power and influence, we've got to affect this issue for women in general, but in particular right now, our women and our sisters in policing.
Thank you. And you hit on a good point that, again, I reflect back on the movie that talked about politics and us trying to keep politics out of what we're doing, but it's so ingrained in what we're doing that you have to be connected to the mayor. You have to be connected to these different entities in order to help some things move forward, because some of them, depending on jurisdictions and municipalities, from my understanding, the mayors are heavily involved in those decisions. And so as much as, you know, again, you captured in the film, you know, some individuals saying we need to take politics out of it. I think that's going to be a heavy lift because they're so heavily ingrained in it, and it's been like that for centuries. And so how are we getting in between? We're getting people that are, you know, taking on these positions and these roles and challenging. So thank you for doing that. Any feedback from the panelists again before I jump into the next question? No? Okay, we'll keep going. Next question is for Shawnette. Can you tell us why you joined the Ethical Society of Police? I'm interested to learn more about this.
Me too.
So like I stated earlier, the Ethical Society of Police is an association that was founded by majority African-American police officers in 1972. And so there's a number of different videos actually about more of the history that I didn't learn about until after I joined. And so I'll tell you why I joined it, then I'll tell you why I continue to stay a member and why I believe in it so much, because it's 2 different answers a little bit. And so when I initially joined, I come from a family in law enforcement. And so I was able to see that good side, if you will, right? Because all of my family, my dad, who is my best friend, who I envy and I idolize everything, and my uncles as well, they were good people. And not just because they were my family, but they were good people. And so I was able to see what a police officer is and who a police officer should be through them. And so going in, I guess you can title it this bit of a naiveness, if you will, going in. I'm just like, hey, you know, police officers, we live a life of service. Everybody has integrity. Nobody lies. Nobody steals. Nobody violates anybody's rights, right? Yeah, whatever. That wasn't true. So I went in and I had those values and those morals, and I still have them to this day. And so when I was getting wrapped in this area of where I was seeing the person to my left and the person to my right did not possess these same morals, I got confused. And then got to the point where it became so heavy, and I saw people like violating laws. I saw that whole, when people would say, hey, you come onto this job, camaraderie is huge, right? We're all together. I didn't see that as much, at least not with people who didn't look like me towards people who didn't like me as much. And so I started to get confused. And then I got to the point where she's near and dear to my heart. I just talked to her yesterday. She is my mentor. Complete side note, women in law enforcement, if you don't have a mentor, then you're missing out. And if you don't have at least one that looks exactly like you, you're definitely missing out. But I had a mentor. She's my best friend and my sister. And I saw how she was treated horribly. I saw how a profession that I love broke her soul. And it turned and broke my soul. And I knew that if this could happen to her, somebody else who had high morals, high values and principles, then it can happen to any of us. So not to say some are more deserving to others, but if it happened to her, it's like, dang, any of us can get got, right? And so we were searching and searching. We were a bunch of officers that were wanting to do the right thing, actually do the right thing. But as we know, people in law enforcement, sometimes it's hard because when you put yourself out there, a lot of times you're out there alone. And now, mind you, again, this is definitely still a dangerous profession. We're not bagging groceries at Target. We're not pushing carts at Walmart, not throwing any shade on those, but this comes with a little bit different style of dangerous environment, right? And so there will be times where officers are purposely left by themselves on calls if they don't agree with you anymore. And so you kind of have to go through this battlefield of, do I continue to speak up and jeopardize my safety, or, what do I do? And so that's where I was finding myself. Like, I'm confused. I'm scared and I'm confused and I'm doing the right thing, but I'm feeling like I'm alone. Well, here comes good Jesus, right? He sends down this wonderful woman named Heather Taylor, who was the president of the Ethical Society at the time. And she's a retired sergeant out of St. Louis City and an absolute amazing person. And Heather was doing exactly what I wanted to do. Heather was standing tall, literally, because I think she's about 5'11" too on top of that. But Heather was standing tall. She was boisterous. She was sound. She was strong. She was unapologetic. She was all of these things that I knew a police officer should be when protecting their community, right? And I saw her and I saw myself in her and I said, that's me. That's what I want to do right there. That's where I want to go. This is what we need, not just for Black officers, but for the Black officers who are speaking up for the people who we're supposed to be serving. That is what we need. And so we had this meeting where we organized and we were able to expand the Ethical Society into an area in which I worked. And it was the first time ever. So it was a historic moment for us to kind of have this association too in our area. And it was the first time that it expanded. So that is why I joined, because you do need that support and you need that guidance. And I was on another panel a while ago and I was the youngest one. And oftentimes I found myself being the youngest police officer on these panels. And the older officers were like, well, what do you need? And I said, well, us younger officers need you to help us. Don't just come over here and tell us what to do and where to go. Come over here with us. Like, come over here in the trenches with us. I know you've been down this road before, but I need you to walk next to me and walk down it again, right? And that's exactly what Heather did. She did that over and over and over and over again. And I love her to death for that. Now, why I remain is because people need us. I look around quite often and people look to us for guidance, right? There are a lot of different people who are either afraid of police departments because they are actually truly fearful of what it is that they may be harmed by police officers. And then there are also groups of people who are afraid because they don't understand this whole organization and culture of law enforcement. Let's be honest, as us as officers, we literally cast people off to the side who don't understand what we do in our world, right? We just cast them off and say, well, you don't get it. You don't understand it. Well, we are going to be that group of people that come back over here. We're going to tell you how to understand it. Look, this is what a chief is. This is what a major is. This is what a colonel is. This is how you file a complaint. This is how you get results in your complaint. This is how you do this, and this. So I stay here because I know people need resources. I know we have to be a resource to our community. So this is why I continue to stay. Because when I look around again to my left and to my right, I don't see very many organizations saying those hard things. We see people saying those compromising things like, well, yeah, this was bad. Maybe we could have. One thing you can always bet your bottom dollar on is the Ethical Society of Police is going to be sitting here on the mountaintop saying that officer racist, that chief need to be fired. These policies are outdated. Everybody wrong. All it is, they need to get charged with murder. Bet your bottom dollar you're going to see the Ethical Society of Police doing that. So that is why I continue to stay, because I know that that is what people need to continue on.
Awesome. Thank you. And for anybody that's interested, as we know, Google it. You can find out, get some more information. But there were some things that you pulled out of there that I've heard time and time again on various panels that I've been a part of, is one, that mentorship piece. We need to make sure that we have mentors that are in the field, mentors that are outside of the field. And I think that's where I look for our seasoned officers, as I say, to do that. And they get very complacent in their position sometimes. And they're like, I've done it, I'm in it, you figure it out. When no, I'm looking for you to reach out and pull me in, you know, and uplift me and support me and push and challenge us to do things. So I'm glad that this society is there to help support, whether it be our women, our people of color, or just those who really are in it and took the oath for the right reasons, to support each other. So mentorship is something I heard there. The other one is challenging, right? Challenging what the culture of law enforcement is. Something that I'm trying to do with my department and departments across, like these conversations, is educate individuals on what it is that we do in law enforcement. Because if we leave it to social media and the society, you know, and the images that are out there, I will tell you, I'm a little, not naive, but biased to it as well, because I've had good experiences, but I've also witnessed bad experiences, and we get more of the negative than we do the positive. And so we have to do better at educating our community about what it is that we do. We have to do better at, you know, just informing about those rankings. Because again, you know, I talk about my campus, we're on campus, but they're still sworn officers. They still have rights to do, you know, what our typical municipalities do. But they don't know that. And so we got to start in the education part and then kind of inform, but also get out there before a crisis happens, so that they, you know, that trust piece that you talked about, building the trust internally and externally. I think one of the panelists shared, and I stopped talking, I get very passionate. Standing side by side with your sister or your brother in blue, you need that support as well if you're going to go out and combat these major crises that we deal with. So thank you. And then again, last but not least, Mirelda, the question I have for you. So you're involved in the community in a host of things that you shared, from Disability Justice League, the NAACP, Democratic Women Caucus. Is there something that you think is important for law enforcement?
Yes, there's a lot of things that I think is really important for law enforcement. You know, being Mexican, I have had issues with discrimination in the community as a community member and as a police officer. And Shanette touched on a lot of things that go with it, that happen within the system. You know, we need support. We need good leadership that's not afraid to say, this is wrong. This officer needs to go, needs to be fired right away. A lot of it's a male dominated field. It really is. And I don't remember, but somebody did mention how it's very difficult for women to climb up the ladder. It is the boys' club, and you know, you try to speak up, but you have to worry about, will they come back me up on a call? And these are things that you have to think about. And when strong women are in this field and we do speak up, people need to realize that we are hunted, we're harassed, we are, they try to humiliate us, they try to dismiss us. I went through that. I was discriminated in a former police department, and I had to file a lawsuit. And a lot of people would tell me, Mirelda, don't let them do that to you, speak up. But I didn't have the support. A lot of women were forced out, and I said, I'm not a quitter. So they hunt you, they harass you, they, I want to say it's like a domestic violence situation where they constantly are telling you you're not good enough, you don't have the courage, they don't back you up, they don't go to your calls, but they're telling you everything you did wrong on the calls. I mean, so something important to highlight is when women and women of color come into this field, we do need support, and we need to be able to tell people without feeling that because we speak up, we're going to be fired. We're not going to have backup. You know, leadership does matter. Support does matter. And, you know, there's a lot of good women that were run out of this field. And, you know, representation does matter. You know, you have little girls out there, little boys out there seeing women in blue and saying, hey, you know, this person is a good person. This person's going to help me. And then they go to see a guy that is a police officer that targets certain people or treats them unfairly. that's the kind of things that we need to speak about, and it's really hard. So this type of conversation needs to happen, and we need to get into it and really speak about it. There has to be light to this problem, and the more that we talk about it and the more that we say it does happen, and here it is, this is why it happens, and this is how we're going to fix it, by bringing attention to it. These police departments do not want the attention brought to them. Okay, you have a racist cop that posts racist social media posts, and they don't want people to know about it, but we keep putting it in the light, and that's what I tend to do, and that's what's going to change it. Police departments don't want that, and that's what we need to focus on, I guess you could say.
I want to pick up just on two things that both of the last panelists said, the mentorship piece, and then also this kind of harassment and that sort of thing. We've talked about women being supportive, but I want to talk about the men's role in this space, because there was a time at the police department where somebody that I helped get hired and promoted, somebody that I helped get promoted, and somebody that I was fighting for them to get a higher salary went to the commissioner and said, "Hey, can we take you for a drink?" And he said, "Well, for what? We need to talk about Ganesha." "What about Ganesha?" "Oh, well, you know what? She talks a lot and she has a lot of opinions. And, people are saying, do you run the police department or her?" And I think in a lot of situations, what would have happened is the men would have got together and Ganesha would have been out. And what happened in that particular situation is I cried. I was upset. One of the persons I called my work husband. So, I was not expecting that. But I asked him, I said, "Can you please call a meeting? And I would like for them to say these things to me." And you already know what happened. Twiddling of the thumbs, looking down. One said, "Well, when you're in the newspaper, you don't give me any credit. So that's I said, "You know what? You could have come to my office and told me that. I guarantee you, I don't do this all on my own. You definitely helped me, so I will give you credit." And so I always give that commissioner credit. And also the last something else is he's called me back in his office about a month later. He says, "I noticed you're not speaking in meetings anymore." And I didn't even realize that I had pulled myself back from the table. He said, "Don't do that. Don't do that." And I cannot tell you how important that he handled that situation. He did, and then still encouraged me, to speak out. And so there is an important role that men have to play. They will be in rooms where we are not. And they have got to speak up and say, "This is not right. This is X, Y, and Z, whatever," to be part of the fight.
Totally agree. And I think there were some comments on the side in the general chat that mentioned that as well, as men need to step up, because we can't do it by ourselves. We can't. Again, they sit around tables that like you said, that we don't sit around, and they got to advocate for us. They got to speak up and speak out. So I will transition a little bit here, and this is for anybody on the panel to answer. But in the movie, there was touch on intersectionality of identity in law enforcement. Why do you think that is important to highlight in law enforcement?
So I'm just going to jump in on this one just real quick. I hate to speak and then speak again, but there is a piece in the film that I have yet to be able to watch without crying. And you may remember it, but it is when Sergeant walks up on the young man who is stopped. And she says to him, he says he doesn't have his license. And she says, "That's why you're scared. It's okay." And her understanding in that moment of, every time it gets me, because it's such a human moment. And it's so many moments that Black and brown people around the country never get. And in police departments across the country, with no malfeasance or anything in their heart, you are taught that when a person's eyes are not, they divert their gaze, they acting, nervous, that's not the time to back up and take that into consideration. What you're actually taught is they could be plotting to take your life. It's an officer safety issue. So what you might do is say, sir, could you then step out of the car? And what do you think is going on in that young man's head or whomever's head? I'm really about to die now. And your legs are shaking. You can't find, you know what I'm saying? And so there is this structure that is set up even for a good police officer who has had it beat into their head in the academy. If you're not hypervigilant, if you don't do these things, you might die. Yet and still our experience as Black people, even when I work for the police, is when I see those lights, I could be the one today. And so her understanding in that moment and bringing it down, I don't know if it's something that can be taught, but it is definitely something that I think we've got to push more and fix what is really something set up even for a good police officer to just further. And like she said, I don't want to add to the trauma. And we're adding to the trauma. We're adding to the distrust. We're adding to the lack of legitimacy. And that's why that intersectionality is so, important. I talked to, you all know, the first African-American female chief of the Capitol Police. I had her on a panel the other day, and she said she got into a car accident and it broke her heart because the first thing that young man did, hands out and she said all she could think about was her son. And all he was just, and she just wanted to know if he was going to be okay. Are you okay? She hit him, and so these things, everybody is traumatized in this situation. She was traumatized as a police officer. He was traumatized. And these are the things that when we have all of these media and fighting and all that, this is the stuff that doesn't get talked about. And this is the way that we have a space to move forward. And so that's why, to me, that intersectionality is so important, because there's a certain level of understanding I think you have to be able to have these conversations.
I agree with you completely. I'm a police officer, and like I told you, my former police department, I still live in the city that I sued for discrimination. And I have surveillance on my house. Okay. I am careful because I'm a police officer and I'm afraid. What are they going to do when I have my young minor children in the car? When they follow me, when they try to intimidate me, those are kind of things that I think about, and I'm a police officer. So what does that say? Everybody thinks that police is all in one team. We're not. Let's be real. We're not. And when people talk about traffic stops, and you touched on this, thank you for doing that. I had a person tell me that, well, if you don't do anything wrong, you shouldn't be scared. And I was like, no, that's not for real. I can tell you, and I told her, I am scared. This is why my phone's yellow, because I'm a police officer and these officers know who I am, but I'm afraid that they're going to say I reached for my gun. I don't carry my duty weapon home because I don't want them saying that I reached for a gun. I don't want to give them any reason. So yes, I understand where a Black or brown man would be afraid, because they know these things can happen. I'm afraid for my brothers, and it's real things like this that play into my head, on traffic stops. You were talking about the traffic stop in the movie. She was engaged and she communicated very well. And the fact that she noticed, and I think that's something that's really, really important. I think women notice these little things. They understand it more. And the fact that she did that, she explained in the conversation, she was very direct. She explained what was happening. She gave answers. She was very, very, just professional, but caring, treating somebody with respect and understanding why they may have those fears. It does a lot for police and community relations. And I think that it's important that, and like you touched on, I don't know if that can be trained. I honestly think there's things that can be trained. Yes, policies, procedures, steps to be doing stuff, but there's other things that cannot be trained. And that's where we need to be at the very beginning of the hiring process. We can't wait until these bad people get hired to carry a gun and have authority and have that power. I do believe that we need to get into the beginning, hiring practices, hiring policies, get in there, being on police committees for hiring. And that's something that we are working on for City of Roosevelt Park, because they do have a history of discrimination. And, it's all primarily a white police department, male. So that's where we're going to try to fix it. And that's where we need to try to fix it, because we can't wait till they're in there, because we have seen how hard it is to hold them accountable and get them fired. It takes somebody dying before anything happens. And it shouldn't be that way, but that's the reality of it. So we have to do it before they get hired in.
Yeah, absolutely. And to not even begin to continuously beat the horse, if you will. But I think one thing that hasn't been talked about very much when we're talking about like police departments as a whole across the country, and one thing we touched on a little bit, whether it been through, the movie or both of our panelists explaining these things. We do, as police departments, we do our employees, our police officers, a great disservice when we are not providing an environment that is conducive to the diversity that we say we want, right? And so we have, point me in a direction once you finally see one, because I have yet to see one, see police departments that has some training or practices that revolves around cultural competency. And so I'm not extremely familiar with where you all are, but I know that St. Louis is a pretty diverse place, right? One thing that I do know is that we're very segregated. We don't practice integration very well here, but it's a diverse place. We have a huge Bosnian community here. We have a huge Indian community. Our St. Louis City itself is on the cusp of being a minority majority. And so we have all these different things that are in here, right? But we don't provide the atmosphere necessary for our employees, our police officers to even feel comfortable with the different type of officers that they have in their departments themselves, right? We are not teaching our police officers about different cultures. We're not. We're absolutely not. We may teeter in to talking about Black Americans here and there. We just may do that. I remember we had a class here in St. Louis it was called like Policing in the Holocaust. And I was like, okay, I'll take this class. We have yet, though, to see a class that talks about the culture or anything that has to do with Black Americans or Hispanics, the people who we have a larger population here. Not saying that shouldn't be talked about, but we don't have anything here with the people that we're dealing with on a daily basis. But yeah, by all means, let's talk about the Holocaust as well and learn again what it is that we should have learned. And so I don't think that we have the spaces necessary to begin to even jump from 1 to 2, right? Secondly, the thing that we are horrible at is that we give police officers the ability to take away life and liberty. I don't know too much authority that's higher than that. We do not teach officers how to deal with authority. We don't. We give it to them and we teach you this warrior style mentality during the 6 or 9 months while you're in the police academy. And we give you a gun. We give you a taser. We give you some pepper spray. We give you an asp. We give you your bulletproof vest. We give you another vest. We give you a flashlight that's, 10 pounds. We give you all of this stuff to make people to comply, right? They're still teaching, I don't know what you all will call it now. They're still teaching ATM in police academies, ATM, ask, tell, make. I'm gonna ask you to do something, I'm gonna tell you to do something, and I'm gonna make you do something. Absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible. And so we're not even teaching our young folks, because you can be 21 and be a police officer. For males, listen, I know women, we're a little bit more advanced, but I know most brains, especially in males, they're not even fully developed until they're about 25 or 26. But we're giving you a gun and we're giving you all of these tools to take away somebody's life. And then we're not teaching you how to deal with that drunkenness of authority that you're drinking every single day you put that uniform on. And so therefore, when you are not able to deal with that authority, and then two, you're not even able to understand the different cultures that you are supposed to be serving and not just policing, right? Because we forget that latter part of we forget that latter part. But when we give you all of this, you're drunk and you have no idea what to do. You have no idea what to do. And then now these are the people who are coming to the calls, right? These are the people on those traffic stops. These are the reasons why that young man was scared in that traffic stop. It's our own fault, to be honest with you. It's not the public's fault. I hate all of those when, we always force citizens to go through shoot, don't shoot. We need you to learn what it is that we're doing here. We need you to come and learn about these policies. That's good, but that emphasis that burden should not be placed on them. The burden is ours. We are failing because we are here to serve. And so that's when we are not understanding our own identity as individuals, when we go into this law enforcement arena, and then when police departments are not providing that space to help them mature, if you will, and to help them learn how to deal with this authority, we might as well just keep on writing these checks off of lawsuits. We might as well just keep on trying to figure out how to have press releases to these conferences that come out when we're talked about when we're doing something wrong. We might as well just open the door for the DOJ to keep on coming in, because you're going to keep on failing time and time again.
Wow. I'm not speechless often, but at the moment, all I can say is wow. Wow. So many pieces I want to unpack there. So many pieces, but I'm keeping track of the time. This is how these conversations go. They go so well, and then you look up and, whew, okay. So this question, we're going to transition. I'm going to process, and so I will be in touch with all of you. We're going to have to continue this conversation, but Deirdre, if you could add to the documentary Women in Blue, what would you add?
I would really, I guess, I don't know. That's a tough one. I think, I think one thing that I might add, and particularly in recognition of the fact that there was an officer-involved shooting with a woman officer, Kim Potter, is that, what I saw and in the Minneapolis Police Department is that there were really two kinds of women. There were women that were fighters. There were women who were challenging the sort of male-dominated status quo. And then there's like the current union president, who is a woman and is just like the union president, male president before. She's ask them, make them, tell them. And so I think that I might make that distinction, that what we really need are people that are going to challenge that status quo and really, really speak up and really look to reimagine it. But going off of, kind of Mirelda's point, is that I might have questioned more the training, that training. Minneapolis has cutting edge training. It was part of an initial group of the Department of Justice. They have a lot of this training. And the fact is that training does not work. And so, I really think maybe I would have made the point more that, and I hope that Sergeant White does it, that I really do believe, I agree, that it's about getting a new kind of person into public safety who reflects what communities are asking for. And that is, that's a really huge thing. It's like, why are we going to the military if we don't want people to be aggressive? Why are we looking at people in terms of upper body strength and speed when you don't actually need that? 98% is about interactions with people. So yeah, it's always hard with a documentary because you're following people, and you're sort of kind of, the story's unfolding. You don't get to totally control it. But I think that, I do think that we need people like Mirelda. We need people like Shawnette. We need people like Sergeant Alice White. And and we need to protect them from the outside. And I do really believe that that's a lot of where our campaign is going to get, like, for instance, police budgets that, tied to getting more women, protecting more women, having a different approach to where you're looking for people and what the requirements are. A lot of people are saying, social workers that's great training. So yeah, I think that I really do believe that, I guess if I would have stayed longer, it might have been looking at how to really restructure a whole approach to who comes into a department, and how you keep them there. And that, I don't want to say a revolution, but I think we don't need a minor change. We need a major change. And we need to uplift people like Mirelda, and she doesn't have to do a lawsuit, because like Chief Harteau was doing a lawsuit in the 90s and it was the same thing. No one was coming to give her backup, right? Those people should be fired. She should be able to come and say, these people, right, are breaking the law. Their job is to protect you and to be there for you. So I do think maybe if I were to kind of go into the film with the mindset that I have now, it would really be about revolutionizing and stepping up and really calling for those voices that speak loud.
Thank you. Oh, so much. Oh, so much. I had a thought and I lost it. I wanted to hit on training. So again, this is an area of something I think we got to take it a step further besides training. I think the mention of cultural competency, both on the front end and the back end and throughout, because I feel like you get trained to a degree as I'm looking at trainings, but those conversations in the community go a long way. So understanding culturally, individuals don't always look eye to eye at you. Some people are fidgety. You have, certain cultural groups that the female is not the person that speaks up. So if she's the one answering the door, she's looking to the male to be the one that speaks up, because that's just the culture that they're in. And so there's these various avenues, and we're not expecting for everyone to know everything, but take a step back when you're approaching these situations and think, how can you go into it a little different? Would you agree? So it's not just the training. And again, some of these situations, you got to go in hot and heavy and address the crisis. But there's other situations like the traffic stop, or like the gentleman who I'm going to say might have had a some sort of mental health or learning disability. The young man that was walking and they called for a suspicious guy, and he, the things that he's saying, I'm like, something is off here. And all you all are telling him is just keep going, instead of checking in a little deeper to find out what's going on with him. And, and then you're going to arrest him and then take the handcuffs off. That could cause somebody who might have a varying, mental health issues, trigger some other things, kind of a thing. So I just took some of those pieces away, is that training is a piece of it, but it's not the solution. I think dialogue and engagement and challenging some conversations and really learning what cultural areas and upbringings different people come from, if that makes sense. Ganesha, I see the wheels going in your head, so go ahead. I'll stop talking.
There's two things there. I think training never works if it's not backed up by leadership. Mm. So if you train that you care, but then you let people get away with stuff. So, I think that's the first thing. I do think training needs to improve. I mean, there was a while where I was going to all this bias training and, everybody was taking it, and you walk out and you like, essentially the training is we all have biases. You're not a racist. So that's it. So it never really said, okay, well, if you have a bias against young Black men, or you have a bias against, little Jewish women, like, what do you do with that? And I'm gonna tell you right now, we leave officers without appropriate training in a lot of different ways. You go pull a police officer off the streets and you tell them to teach They don't know anything about adult learning. They don't know how to write a curriculum. They don't. So, the system, in my opinion, is setting them up for failure. So I do think training, first of all, raise the quality, help them. They do it the way that they need to, invest in that. And the other thing is too, and y'all know this, command does not like to take police officers off the street, particularly when you have high violence, because you got to pay overtime. So there's a cost to it. So the officers are not invested in. But to go to that, making sure that you hold people accountable, this is the piece that I think is very important. Your disciplinary matrix, your disciplinary system has to align with those principles and values that you taught in the academy. And when somebody violates those, you need to do something about it. Now that's a two-sided coin, because there are police chiefs, and I watched, there was a guy who had over 200 entries in his background at the police department, but he put meat on the table. Okay, in police parlance, that's guns and drugs. Did nobody ask how he did it? Okay, not always legal, but we almost had to Al Capone him. I mean, there's this one small thing to get him out. There's police chiefs I've said on panels right now where they fire police 2 and 3 times and they get their jobs back. So this is also why I said this impact campaign and having conversations are important, because you can have police chiefs that hold people accountable to the training, which is some baseline stuff to do. But then you also have to be able to have the laws to be able to support getting those people out. Can you imagine what a bad apple, like you discipline your child, you did all this stuff, and then somebody say, baby, please go in there and tell your mama X, Y, and Z. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, the child might die, but you know what I'm saying. You can imagine that behavior when they come back in. It just, it's not helpful. There was one other thing, but I was like, you're going all off with this child. I lost my train of thought on the accountability. Oh, here's the last thing I'll say about training. So in one of the consulting jobs that I have now, we as consultants are able to take their data, analyze their data, and say, you're stopping, Black males between the ages of 16 and 24. And by the way, when you stop them, you did not have reasonable suspicion. You didn't have probable cause to, and your hit rate, you're not even getting the contraband you think you saw. And so then after we gave them that data, they were then able to their credit, change the training to go directly to that issue. You guys, we can't do this. We can't do that. Again, police departments, while this big issue about how big their budget is, the budgets usually are salaries and fringe benefits. It is not a whole lot of fat. And so the fact that we're outside consultants that we're looking over their shoulder because they were sued by the ACLU, and that's the way they were able to change their training, that type of analysis should be in the police department so they can be holding themselves accountable. And I think that data should be shared with the community as well.
Absolutely. I agree. Ganesha, you said one thing that I think that we're not even ready to have this conversation about, because it would have to include because let's be honest, right? The chiefs really don't run the police department, at least in a number of different major city type of police departments. The CEOs, the large corporations, and the politicians run the police department. And I point more so towards the CEOs and the corporations, right? Because that's where the money is coming into the city. And so what you will see is, and this is where your wheels got to start thinking, right? As police officers, to be honest with you, your job ain't just, or isn't, I ain't gonna say ain't that much, right? Your job, we all family, whatever. Your job ain't to go out there and to just police, right? Make sure you lock up the bad people. You need to know about all this overhead. You need to know about why it is that you even doing your job in the first place. You should know about the people that's controlling your job. You should know about the people that's actually has input on the policies that you have going on the job. And you should know about the people that's putting the police chiefs in your job, because it's not the general population that's wanting these police chiefs here, right? And the thing that you touched on that I think that it is extremely important is when we begin to talk about these police departments, and we see the things that are going on, I bet your bottom dollar the chief knows exactly, chief or commissioner, whichever word that you want to use, or deputy or sheriff, whichever one, they know exactly what's happening in their police departments, but they are failing to act, and they're living a life of willful blindness. They know that there's smoke over here, but if I don't turn my head over there and see this fire, then I don't have to answer to this fire. Chiefs are living comfortably. You getting your 100,000, 200,000, whatever it is that you getting, and you got to come out here and do a couple press conferences when we have officer involved shooting or whatever it is. You got to sign off on some policies. They need to be more involved in what's going on, because I'm promising you, Derek Chauvin's, it's a Derek Chauvin in every last one of these police departments in America. I promise you. I put my next paycheck on it. I ain't got time to put all my paychecks up or something like that. But I promise you, there's a Derek Chauvin in every single police department, every single one of them. And the chief probably knows who they are, but they're not doing anything about it. When we're talking about officers who have internal affairs files, they have internal affairs files as long as I-95. I don't know what area you all in, but they long as ever. They long as the Mississippi River. And we know these officers are bad, but all that we are worried about is money and the guns that we say when we're getting off the street, that we're saying or we're trying to say that has an impact on crime, when it really ain't got that much of an impact on crime. We got officers getting, 5 guns here, 5 guns this year, another 5 guns this year. That ain't having no impact on crime. Look at Philadelphia. Philadelphia has almost doubled their shootings over 2020. You think they stopped getting guns off the street? No, I'm pretty sure they're still working and getting those off. We got to look at the real issues here. But we're putting these C-string and D-string people in leadership positions that know damn well they shouldn't be in these leadership positions because they can't lead. They can't lead. They can't fight crime. They can't address the racism in their police departments. They don't know what cultural competency is. They don't know what employee laws are. They know nothing about any of these things. And so what we got to turn to look at these CEOs, these corporations, these politicians who called a buddy, they said, I want that person to be chief. I want that person to run this police department. Once again, we're talking about people who have the ability to take away life and liberty. And you just want your friend to have this job. Who is worried about the people at the end of the day? Who? And so when we begin to incorporate training, look how departments are incorporating training. A lot of times they're using it as a disciplinary measure. So when officers get in trouble, then they say, you need to go to this training. Well, they didn't want to go to this training in the first place because they got in trouble. 2, they not going to listen when they come here in the first place. And 3, it's like, we just wasted our money on this. And I saw a question pop up, not to go forward when we're talking about, well, what type of training do we need? Yeah, of course, everybody needs to know about implicit bias, right? We talked about that. And so when you start telling everybody, I think Ganesha mentioned that, we tell everybody that, hey, everybody has biases, right? Yeah, this is true. But hold on, we're going to call a spade a spade. Everybody ain't racist. A lot of these people racist. So let's learn how to separate these things. Let's learn what words mean and the terms mean. Fire these racist people. And if the racist people happen to be the chief, then fire the chief. If it happen to be the colonel, fire the colonel. We don't have time for this. And we've been waiting time and time again to reform police, reimagine police, reinvent police, whichever word you want to use, but it ain't happening. We've been here for so long. My favorite James Baldwin has said, how much longer do you want? Because every time you get a new administrator in, a new mayor, a new county mayor, they said, well, give me time. Give me time. We ain't got that much time. Because when we keep using this time, we're going to have another Eric Gardner. We're going to have another George Floyd. We're going to have another Breonna Taylor. And guess who's being traumatized by this? We are. So while you're sitting comfortably and you're not being traumatized and you asking for time, we ain't got time. Time ain't on our side. So go on about your business.
I appreciate the honesty. Again, I'm at a loss for words. I'm glad I have questions here because I have so many things I just want to process through. Oh, I love you ladies. I truly do. I don't say that often, but I do. We talked about reform. So the next 2 questions I have, the first one is around what reform, and again, any of you can answer. What reform efforts do you feel is necessary to make police agencies more inclusive for women?
So I can speak just really quickly. There is a new effort just launched March 25th. It's called 30 by 30. It's put out by the NYU Policing Project. I am on the steering committee and part of that effort. And so essentially what you have is we ask police chiefs to take a pledge that they will be intentional about increasing women at all ranks in their police force. But what I said to the group is that pledge is one thing, but the actual doing of it, the actual tracking of it, the actual, sometimes even just giving the technical assistance. How do you do this? We found a lot of police departments don't even track the number of women that they have versus the number of men, just basic things like that. There is not enough formalized system past, maybe a test for a sergeant or lieutenant. When you get to the command ranks where you can be appointed, how are those decisions made? How many people were skipped over? That sort of thing. So, there's, for the past 20 some odd years, it has, the amount of women in policing has been about 12%. And we're trying to get it to 30% by 2030. And, the question is, if women shoot less, if women use excessive force less, if women problem solve more, if women get sued less, then I just think the basic question is, if we're talking about all this police reform and police involved shootings and uses of force are at the core of it, let's have a conversation around what role women should play in police reform. And so that's one thing that I would commend folks to do, 30 by 30. Get your chiefs to sign it, get your mayors and councils to get behind it, and then put together a group to hold people accountable to check in on those different metrics.
One thing I want to say is just, everyone talks about, defund the police, or we need, how do we lower the cost so we can actually support communities and actually help people so that they don't get involved in the criminal justice system. And, just a number that I think people should have at the tip of their tongue is that women cost 2.5 to 5.5 times less than male officers because of these payments. These outlays for lawsuits. Minneapolis has put out $40 million in the last couple of years between the killing of George Floyd and the killing of Justine Damon. And so, I just think that's important, that if you want to play that game, all right, one thing, dollars and cents, we're a capitalist country. Like, let's talk about the fact that women are a better investment. But, I think that it's not, I just don't think that this can happen just with police departments. I think it has to also come from the outside. So culturally, as a country, I think people have to be talking about this. I think that, we need federal input, so that laws are made. And I think we need city, I think mayors need to literally say, you want this budget? Okay. This budget is contingent on this and this and this. And you've got to formulate a way to do this, because, if you talk to most chiefs, and when I was looking for a department to follow, they all say the same thing. Yeah, it'd be better if there were more women. It's just a little bit like I'm biased. It's like, but what are you doing about it? And they're still following the same protocols, right? They're still going to the same places. And also, women, and particularly Black women that I've talked to, many are not attracted to the profession. There's a lot about it that feels brutal. So I think getting more women has got to be part and parcel of changing the profession to be the ethical. I love that. I love the name, to be this ethical thing of conscience, where we are there to cause less harm, not to create more harm. So I think it's going to take all hands on deck. Anyone, I really love what Ganesha said. Everybody who can in some way push their local police department, talk about this with their, and push their mayors, and really think that it's going to take a lot of forces working together, because why we have a population that is 50% women. We should have 50% women. 30 is a great start, because that's the tipping point. 12%, it's been 30 years. That's a long time. And that shows that that system does not want to change, right? I think a lot of police officers are very happy with the way it's been. And maybe now they're beginning to get a little uncomfortable, because they're seeing there's a rising tide to hopefully finally create some justice within that profession.
And, this is when Iris kind of touched on it briefly in the beginning, right? When in her role, what it is that she does. police departments, every police department say, oh yeah, we love diversity. We want more diversity. We can find diversity. Oh yeah. But then you start to ask them what inclusion is, and they're like, well, they begin to stumble a little bit. We make everybody feel included. We invite everybody to the party, right? And then you're like, well, what kind of equitable measures do you have in place to achieve this diversity that you're saying that you want? And they're like, we treat everybody fairly, and no, we said equity. What are you doing that's equitable to get to where it is that you're trying to go, right? To increase your diversity. And so in this case now, when we talk about increasing women being on the field, okay, let's make it plain, right? Let's put it down here. Let's start from the beginning. What do we need to have more women here, right? So I'm gonna just say this. How many police stations have a extra room where women can go and they can use their breast pump? How many rooms do we have that? Or do we have any of those rooms at police stations, right? How many places do we have, let's say, Black women? Black women are the most educated group in America, right? How many police departments are enhancing their tuition reimbursement program that they have, if they have one at all? So we say, you know what, you come along with us. We know you probably got a student loan debt. Guess what? We're going to give you even more money towards that student loan debt. Because if you tell me right now, a job knock on my door and say, I pay 50% of your loans off, baby, where you want me to sign my application at? Because I'll come in a minute, okay? So let's think about these things that promote having more women. How many police departments actually have a mentoring group that is specific for women? How many of them actually have it? And so those are the places, those are the people that are up front recruiting these officers. So those are the ones that are actually giving out their real experiences to let other people come along and know, hey, we feel comfortable. So you're not going to come across, well, you may come across I don't know if you go down south or some rural places that say they don't want no diversity. But how many police departments are honestly going to say they don't want diversity? Okay, I hear it coming out your mouth, but what are your feet doing when you get off your butt and you start putting in the work? You're not going to hear anything. You're not going to hear it. We go to women job fairs and what? You don't even know how to get what it is you're asking for. Once again, the leadership. You're failing. You're failing. You're getting a D+ at best right now. So we have to boil it down. We have to say, what are we looking for? How do we get it? And then if we do say this, we're going to put in the plan, where is this buy-in coming from? Because they got to come from the top to the bottom, and they got to come from the left and the right and the outsides in. You have to have these things put in place. And then you got to ask the people that are there, what do you want? How can I make you feel more comfortable right now? Because I'll probably tell you, well, you can give me some different pants. Because these things that we wearing right now, it's that easy sometimes. You can give me a women's shirt. You can give me a vest that's fitted for my breast instead of me being flat-chested. I mean, come on. Sometimes it's that easy. But whenever you do not have a will, you will never have a way.
Mm. The actionable pieces of inclusion and equity. Right? But I want to add this little piece, and then I'll ask the second question that we have on here is you can hire, I'll use myself, for example, as an African-American woman in the role that I'm in. But if I don't have the legs to stand on, to challenge and to push, my visibility means nothing, right? My visibility means nothing. I'm just in the position, check. Mark, right? We hired a Black lady, we hired a person from the inner city, we hired somebody with glasses. I use all these, but if I don't have the ability to challenge, to embrace, to have a voice around those tables, then me physically being here means nothing. So I appreciate it. Conscious of time, so again, we can talk for hours about this. This is beautiful. We'll hit on this really quickly. A lot of you shared, and then I'll ask the infamous question that we ask every panelist at the end. But before we do that, the last question I have is, what specific training would you all recommend with COVID restrictions, budgets, and how do you convince departments to invest in more of these trainings?
So one of the first things that I would say is we often go to the police chief and we go to the police commissioner, which you took the job, you need to take the hits, that's fine. But we often forget they are employees of the mayor, the county executive, whatever it is. And so we need to look at the overall budgets. We need to not necessarily, because I can tell you right now, part of my role that I have in my BP position is I'm helping police departments who want to work with their community. I'm giving them money, because when I was at the police department, I was running the Under Armour and M&T Bank and everybody to fund my initiatives. And I was in a high enough rank to understand that we just didn't have the money. And so, you know, we need to, you know, not only ask the department to invest, but we need to have the commissioner, the mayors and the folks who really handle and have that money. The other thing is that, and I'm hoping that the Biden administration will be very helpful in this. The training is paltry in a lot of different places. Number one. Number two, there's 18,000 police departments. The training is different all across the country. And so one of the things that I know the Biden administration is working towards, and parts of this are in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which, you know, they're looking to push forward on May 25th, is standardizing some of this stuff, standardizing what use of force means, standardizing the tracking of it, the reporting out of it, those sorts of things. I do think, to go back to the cultural competency training, we did something in Baltimore. We called it the history of Baltimore, where we talked about redlining. Sometimes police officers say, oh, well, these Black people wanted it. They Black on Black violence, and look at them. They're not doing anything with their life. Understand that was specifically and intentionally done. They were redlined. They were not able to buy homes. There is no transportation over there. The kids in schools can't drink the water because of lead poisoning. You know, understand that some people are in situations because generations before they were put there on purpose. We had people come in who were formerly on drugs, and they gave stories to the police. Well, the way you treat me, calling me an addict, calling me a crackhead, those sorts of things. This is what this does to me. We had folks from the LGBTQ community come in and talk and say, these are the pronouns that we need. These are the ways, arrest procedures, those sorts of things. Again, all of those things need to happen. This will surprise many of you. The constitutional training that happens in police departments. Okay. There are people that they do not really understand how to explain what reasonable suspicion is, what probable cause is. A lot of police officers, there's not testing that's done to actually see, do they understand the concept before you go and give them a gun and a badge. I mean, there are basic things that don't happen at police departments, and I don't blame police. I know that sounds crazy, but most police departments are not even built to think in a strategic way. They are given these tools and say, go suppress crime, go deal with those bad people. So there needs to be some investment at a national level where there is training that's evidence-based, that's proven, and that is given to police departments. There are benchmarks to see if they actually work, if you have the outcomes that you need, and then that's iterated on, that investment is there. I'm gonna stop now.
Drop the mic.
You touched on a lot of good things. It's true. Like, I've seen male officers that will lie to people about the law to get to where they want to be, in traffic stops or in scenarios, you know. And I'm thinking, that's not it. You know, I'm here to educate. And I can tell you this: I didn't become a cop to be a bully or a liar. I came into this because I wanted to make a good impact. I wanted kids like me to see that they can be what they want to be, and they can help people, and they can educate people. You know, I look at it as I'm educating them on the laws. And if I don't know it, because there's so many laws out there, I'm going to admit I don't know it and look it up and give it to them. You know, I've seen officers, like you touched on, that do begin the aggressiveness. You know, I had the way they talk to people. We went to a call, and this was when I first started, I think 5 years in. We went to a call, and this officer that I was working with did have a tendency to make people more aggressive because of the way he treated them. And we went to a loud music call, and this officer approaches this guy, says he's going to run him for warrants. He says, "Hey, I just want to tell you I'm on parole." And this officer tells him, "Oh, model citizen, aren't we?" and starts dogging him out. And I'm looking at him like, what? The guy just told you. He didn't, he's being straight up, honest, blunt with us. Why start stuff? And he's just so, I'm like, hey, this isn't necessary kind of thing, And then I have a male officer that if he comes up to you and he's very aggressive and hostile, and if he doesn't like how you talk to him, he would tell people at the police department, this is what you do. You stand right up to their faces, step on the part of the toes, because most people, if you step on their toes, reflex to go like this, and then they could say, oh, he tried to hurt me. He tried to swing at me. These are tricks that bad police officers use to, what am I looking for now? I just missed the word, but
break the law.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? I mean, you don't play those types of disgusting games. I'm not going to be there to do that kind of stuff. I don't want to be associated with those type of police officers, because that's not me. I want to be straight with people. And yes, people will break the law, but most of the time you let them know, hey, this is it. They're reasonable. I don't get in a lot of fights because I don't treat people crappy. I'm not I don't want to swear on here, but you know what I mean? I'm not like that, and a lot of women officers or good male officers aren't like that either. But, you got police officers out there lying about the law, saying things that didn't happen, making us all look bad. And all these things are bringing this atmosphere and this environment. What we need to do is just get rid of those officers. And it's really hard because, like you said, you got police chiefs that are, the mayors aren't like here, City of Roosevelt Park. You got the mayors and the politicians. You're telling them, hey, this guy's been sued 3 times for discrimination. There's something wrong. And they ignore, dismiss, or say, no, you're not right. Here's the paperwork. Here's the court papers, but they're not doing anything about it. They have to be forced. And that's what's sad, is that we have to force people to do the right thing. It's disgusting. Sorry, I went off on a tangent.
It's okay. It's all right. Well, thank you again, ladies. We will ask again, like I said, our famous question that we like to ask every panelist when we do our strategies for justice. In this particular order, the voice of women in policing was the topic throughout the film. And that is important with strategies for justice. So the question is, so with that said, what message would you like to leave for America? In no particular order.
I'll go. When we're talking about just what you said, the voice of women is important. So women, know your voice is important, right? Use it. I know it's hard. I know it's tough. I know this firsthand. Literally, I've been there, but you have to use your voice. You have to. I am reminded of a picture I see all the time, and it says, "Women, tell your stories so our girls know what to do." Mm. So if we don't tell our stories, how do we know that the person coming behind us will know what to do? And so if we are living that life of service, if we are living that life that's filled with integrity and loyalty, if we're not telling the person behind us our struggles, our trials and tribulations that we've had to deal with, how do we know that they're not going to stumble harder than what we did? So your voice is extremely important, but you have to use it, and never think that it's not important. Never think that you have to have rank just to have a voice. Never think that you just have to be in a certain room to have a voice. Never put any limitations on your voice, because when you use it appropriately, if you're loud when you have it, or if you're subtle when you have it, when you use it appropriately, I promise you somebody will hear it. So use it.
Thank you.
So I think we should just shut it down after that.
Yeah.
And we're done. I would say, to America, to start with yourself. We are very quick to point the finger at what somebody else didn't do, what they're doing wrong. But you wouldn't be here but for a woman. And quite frankly, we have an issue across America with respecting and revering our women. And so, what I would say is start with yourself and say, what can I do? Because sometimes we're always looking for that big thing. What's the movement that I can start? What's the 501c3 that I can start? But I promise you that if you look at who you are and your sphere of influence, there is something that you can do to support women in general, but support women in law enforcement specifically. And I would urge you to do that now and do not wait, because I do believe that the murder of George Floyd opened up a door that is still open, but will not stay open unless there are people standing in the gap to keep it that way. And so do not wait. The time is now for us to move forward.
Thank you.
Well, I think I'll just jump in and say I've just been so in awe of all of you. Thank you. And I think I thought, when I was making the film, that Sergeant White was so unique, and then meeting other women officers from around the country. And I think that I hope that people, I think it's great that we have a protest movement that's pushing and crying out for change. But I think we also have to look and see that all officers are not made of the same cloth, and to really support those officers so that those officers' voices, so that they can feel that support, and that those women in particular can speak out, and that we see it not as us versus them, but as that there are people both in the system and outside the system who are demanding change. And just really in awe of all of you tonight.
Thank you.
I thank you women for being on here. It's been, the opportunity is just, I'm so honored. So I guess I would like to say that, to everybody in America, not all police officers are bad, but there are bad police officers, and they need to be fired. There are good cops. They need to be supported. And the police need to be accountable. They need to be accountable to each other and to the public. And, we all know what's right and wrong. We do. And I also want to just kind of say what Ruth Bader Ginsburg would say. We should not be held back from pursuing our full talents, from contributing what we could contribute to society because we fit in a certain mold, because we belong to a group that historically has been the object of discrimination. So I want to reiterate what the other women have said, use your voice and keep using your voice, because we're strong. We're strong women. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your passion, your knowledge, your skills, the reach that you're making. And again, you'll all be added to my Rolodex for context. But thank you again for our audience that is watching both on all platforms. Thank you for joining in, and everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.